Life. It begins with a single breath. A moment of vulnerability, of innocence, of pure potential. We all know that life isn't perfect. But have you ever thought about the fundamental struggles we face as human beings? The ones we can't escape, no matter who we are or where we're from? In Buddhism, these are known as the four sufferings: birth, aging, sickness, and death. And while these experiences may seem bleak, they're not just a reality we must endure. They're opportunities for profound insight and understanding about our existence. Think about it. From the moment we're born, we're already on a journey filled with inevitable challenges. As we grow older, we begin to notice our bodies changing, sometimes in ways we don't understand or want. Then comes sickness. Whether physical or emotional, we all experience some form of it. And, of course, death. It's the one thing we all know will happen, but it's the hardest to talk about. But here's the twist. In Buddhism, these sufferings aren't just things to fear or avoid. They are windows into a deeper truth about life and our place in it. They show us the impermanence of everything and the potential for freedom and peace when we fully embrace this reality. In today's video, we're going to explore each of these four sufferings, break down their deeper meanings, and look at how they can help us live a more mindful, present, and peaceful life. You might be surprised at what these ancient teachings can offer in the modern world. So if you're ready to rethink suffering and how it shapes our journey, stay tuned. You might just find that understanding these four sufferings is the key to unlocking a deeper sense of peace and freedom in your life. Number 1, the first suffering, birth. Have you ever thought about the very beginning of our lives? The moment of birth, what is often seen as a joyous occasion, is, in the teachings of Buddhism, the first of the four sufferings, a powerful truth that we all must face. As Buddha once said, birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering. At first glance, this may seem harsh, even contradictory to the joy and celebration that often surround the birth of a child. But Buddha's words aren't meant to be grim. They are a wake-up call, urging us to look deeper. When we think of birth, we usually associate it with new beginnings, hope, and the beauty of life. But the Buddha asks us to look closer. What happens the moment we are born? We are thrust into a world of uncertainty, surrounded by conditions we have no control over. From the very first breath we take, we begin a journey of discomfort and vulnerability. Think about it. We enter this world crying, helpless, and entirely dependent on others. We have no voice in the matter, no choice in the circumstances of our birth. We are born into a world where things change, where everything is impermanent. And, as we will see throughout the other three sufferings, this impermanence is at the core of our experience of suffering. Buddha's insight into birth as suffering isn't about the beauty of life being absent. It's about understanding the nature of existence. From the moment we are born, we are subject to change. We are born into a body that will age, grow ill, and eventually die. But this truth isn't meant to depress us. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's meant to free us. Because when we face the truth of suffering, we begin to see the world in a new way. We start to question why we hold on to things that are fleeting, why we chase after what is ultimately unsustainable. Buddha teaches us that birth, like the other three sufferings, is part of the cycle of life, one that we cannot avoid, no matter how hard we try. But what we can do is change how we relate to it. We can learn to accept it, not with resignation but with understanding. When we truly understand that birth, with all its joys and challenges, is just the start of a deeper journey, we can begin to transform our relationship to all aspects of life. You see, birth isn't just an event. It's a profound reminder of impermanence. The beginning of life is also the beginning of change, the beginning of growth, and the beginning of suffering. It's not something to be feared, but something to be understood. So the next time we celebrate the arrival of a new life, let's pause for a moment to reflect, not just on the joy, but also on the deeper truth of that moment. The truth that each of us, the moment we are born, steps into the dance of life and death. That each breath we take is a reminder that nothing lasts forever. That we are born to change, to grow, and yes, to experience suffering, but also to awaken, to understand, and to ultimately find peace within it all. As we continue exploring the four sufferings, remember this: Buddha's teachings aren't meant to make us fear life, but to show us the way to truly live. By understanding the inevitable nature of suffering and finding freedom within it. Number 2. The second suffering, aging. The Buddha himself spoke of it clearly. Old age is a sickness and no one can escape it. These words hold a deep truth. Aging isn't just the gradual fading of youth or beauty. It's a relentless process, a series of changes that leave us feeling powerless. Our bodies, once strong and full of potential, begin to show signs of wear. Wrinkles, grey hair, and aches that weren't there before. The energy that once fueled our passions begins to diminish. But here's the thing. The fear of aging doesn't come from the wrinkles or grey hairs themselves. It comes from the attachment we have to them. We cling to youth, to vigor, and to the idea that we are immortal. And when time inevitably moves forward, when the body shows its age, we feel an unsettling loss. Loss of control, loss of identity, loss of what we once were. It's not just physical aging either. The mind too undergoes a transformation. Memories fade, clarity dulls, and we start to question our purpose. What does it all mean when the future seems uncertain, when the inevitable is staring us in the face? But here's the beauty in what the Buddha teaches us. Aging is not something to fear. It is in fact part of the natural order. The Buddha said, aging is not a problem. It is a part of life, and to deny this is to live in delusion. When we stop fearing aging, we open ourselves to a deeper, more profound way of living. Instead of resisting the passage of time, we can choose to embrace it, not as a loss, but as a chance to grow. Every wrinkle, every grey hair is a sign of a life lived, a story unfolding, a wisdom deepening. Aging teaches us humility. It reminds us that we are not invincible, that time moves on whether we like it or not. But it also gives us a gift, perspective. The older we get, the more we see beyond the superficial. We start to recognize what truly matters, the love we give, the relationships we cherish, the impact we leave on the world. Rather than focusing on the decay of the body, the Buddha asks us to turn inward and contemplate the impermanence of all things. Aging is simply another chapter in the cycle of life, just as birth and death are. So what does this all mean for us right now, in this moment? How can we apply this understanding to our daily lives? The answer lies in acceptance and mindfulness. When we accept aging for what it is, an unavoidable part of life, we can find peace with it. We no longer need to fear it. As the Buddha wisely taught, the root of suffering is attachment, and it's through letting go of our attachment to youth, beauty, and the illusion of permanence that we can find true freedom. Aging in this sense becomes not a curse, but a teacher. It's an opportunity to live more fully, to savor each moment, and to share our wisdom with the world. So, as we walk through life, let's remember that aging isn't a battle to win or lose. It's a journey to be embraced. With every day that passes, we move one step closer to the wisdom that can only come with age. And when we stop fearing it, we open ourselves up to the beauty of this fleeting, precious existence. Number 3. The third suffering, sickness. Imagine this. You wake up in the morning, your body aches, your energy is low, and there's that constant nagging feeling that something is wrong. Maybe it's a cold, maybe it's something more severe. Either way, sickness is something every one of us has encountered or will encounter at some point. It's part of life. And yet, it's also one of the most painful truths we can face. In Buddhism, sickness is one of the 4 sufferings. And when the Buddha spoke about it, he wasn't just talking about a runny nose or the occasional headache. He was speaking to the deep existential pain that comes when our body, this vessel we rely on, betrays us. Our body, no matter how strong or healthy it may seem, is impermanent. It can break down, deteriorate, and become a source of immense suffering. The Buddha's teachings on sickness go beyond just physical pain. Sickness forces us to confront the fragility of our existence. We can't control it. No matter how much we try to protect ourselves, prevent illness, or find a cure, sickness can come at any time, unexpectedly and without warning. The Buddha knew this. He understood that in this world, we are all subject to this inevitable truth. When we get sick, we feel vulnerable, weak and helpless. Our plans are disrupted, our routines are shattered, and our normal, carefree state of mind is replaced by worry and discomfort. Whether it's a brief illness or a prolonged one, sickness has the power to change our perception of the world. In those moments of pain or uncertainty, we are reminded of how little control we actually have over our lives. But it's not just about physical illness. It's also about the way sickness makes us reflect on our deeper fears, our fear of mortality, of death itself. As our bodies get weaker, we may start to question, what does this suffering mean? What happens when this sickness becomes something more permanent? Am I ready for what's coming? The Buddha once said, "Sickness is the great teacher." It teaches us about impermanence, non-attachment, and the importance of living in the present moment. And that's where the lesson lies. Sickness, in all its forms, is a stark reminder of the impermanent nature of our bodies and this world. It shows us that nothing is guaranteed, that we can't take our health or anything else for granted. Every moment we have is a gift. Sickness invites us to pause and appreciate the fragility of life. It encourages us to stop, reflect, and reconsider how we live our lives. Are we living in ways that prioritize true well-being, mental, physical, and spiritual? Are we taking care of ourselves and others with kindness and compassion? Or are we merely rushing through life, blind to the impermanence of all things? What makes sickness such a profound suffering in the Buddhist path is that it forces us to confront our attachment to our bodies, to our identities, and to the way we perceive the world. We often associate health with happiness and vitality with success. When sickness strikes, it shakes up these assumptions and forces us to look at what's truly important. The more we cling to the idea of perfect health, the more we suffer when that illusion is broken. But here's the thing. This is not a call to despair. Far from it. The Buddha's teachings about sickness are not meant to make us fear life. They are meant to help us understand that suffering, like sickness, is part of the human condition. It is only by recognizing and accepting this suffering that we can truly begin to heal, not just from illness, but from the fear, anxiety, and stress that often accompany it. And through that understanding, we can find peace. The Buddha didn't offer us a way to avoid sickness. He offered us a way to face it with wisdom. Through mindfulness, acceptance, and compassion, we can transform the way we relate to illness and suffering. In doing so, we can approach life, even with its challenges, with greater equanimity, awareness, and gratitude. Sickness, just like birth, aging, and death, is a part of the human journey. But with the Buddha's guidance, we can learn to navigate it with grace. So the next time illness strikes, whether it's a mild cold or something more severe, remember, it's not just a challenge, but an opportunity. An opportunity to reflect on the nature of your life, to let go of attachment and to embrace the present moment. And in that, you will find the true healing. Number 4, the fourth suffering, death. We've already explored birth, aging, and illness. But now we turn to the most profound and inevitable of them all, death. All that is conditioned is subject to decay. Death. It's a word that can stir up fear, sadness, and uncertainty. It's something we all try to avoid thinking about, yet it's the one certainty we have. We spend our lives building, acquiring, and accumulating, believing that somehow we can escape this ultimate fate. But, as Buddha taught, everything that is born must die. There's no escaping it. No matter how rich we become, how powerful or how wise, death waits for us all at the end of the road. But why does death, this final suffering, stand out in Buddhism? Why is it so central to the Buddha's teachings? The answer lies not in the idea of death itself, but in how we perceive it. In our modern world, we're so busy living that we rarely pause to think about the inevitable. Many of us live as though death is something far off, an abstract concept we can push aside. But the Buddha tells us otherwise. He encourages us to confront the truth of death, not in fear, but in understanding. When we don't acknowledge death, we live in denial, constantly running from the truth. This fear of the unknown can cause us immense suffering. We create attachments to people, to possessions, to experiences, believing they will somehow protect us from the finality of death. But this is an illusion. As Buddha said, the idea of I is the cause of all suffering. So what can we do? How can we find peace when faced with such a certainty? The Buddha's teachings offer us a way forward. By contemplating death, we gain insight into the impermanence of all things. We are reminded that everything we hold dear will one day fade away. And when we embrace this truth, we can start to let go of our attachments. Think about it. If we could live our lives with the awareness that everything we experience is temporary, how would we live differently? Would we cling less to the trivial, the fleeting? Would we hold our loved ones closer and live with more compassion, knowing that time is limited? In facing death, the Buddha calls us to live with right understanding. We must be aware of our mortality, but also understand that death is not the end. It is not something to fear, but something to accept as part of the cycle of life. Buddha taught that death is not to be feared by one who has lived wisely. When we accept the impermanence of life, we learn to live fully in the present. We are no longer obsessed with avoiding death or holding on to what we can't keep. Instead, we start to embrace the beauty of the here and now. Death is not just an end, but a profound teacher. It reminds us to live wisely, to cherish the moments we have, and to recognize that true peace comes from letting go. By acknowledging that our time is limited, we open ourselves to a deeper understanding of life. So the fourth suffering is not a burden, but a profound opportunity. It challenges us to live with awareness, wisdom, and love. In accepting death, we can free ourselves from fear and open the door to a life of true freedom. Remember, as Buddha said, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. As we reflect on the four sufferings, birth, aging, sickness, and death, we realize that these are universal truths of life. They affect all of us, and yet, in understanding them, we unlock the path to true peace. Birth reminds us of new beginnings. Aging teaches us the value of every moment. Sickness shows us the importance of compassion. And death urges us to live fully in the present. But here's the powerful part. Buddhism offers a way to overcome suffering. It doesn't ask us to ignore life's challenges, but to embrace them with wisdom and compassion. By understanding the nature of these sufferings, we learn to free ourselves from their grip. We can transform pain into a source of growth, and through mindfulness, find peace in the midst of change. So, as you leave today, carry this truth with you. Suffering is not the end. It's an opportunity to awaken, to transform, and to live with deeper understanding. The path to peace is within you. Are you ready to walk it?